Hello and welcome to See You in Court, a podcast that informs you about the Georgia civil justice system, what it means to you, and how it protects individual rights. During each episode, we dive deep into stories, cases, and insights that matter to Georgians. You can learn more on our website at www.seeyouincourtpodcast.org. Join the conversation on our YouTube channel at See You in Court Podcast, and stay connected with us on our Facebook page at facebook.com/seeyouincourtpodcast. This podcast is sponsored by the Georgia Civil Justice Foundation. Your hosts are robinfrazerclark and lestertate, who are both past presidents of the State Bar of Georgia and who both serve on the board of directors of the Georgia Civil Justice Foundation. And now this episode of See You in Court.
Good morning, friends and lovers of the law, and welcome to See You in Court. I'm Robin Fraser Clark, and with me here today is our co-host, lestertate, right back from a big trip to Africa.
That's right. Spent 12 days there. It was fabulous. I could even listen to the Georgia Tech football game on my app while I was in Cape Town, South Africa. So I was just in heaven,
So you did your part in the win.
I did my part. It took overtime. That was the Wake Forest game, and had gone out to eat with our friends Hal and Lori Daniel, and they were kind enough to not be offended to me listening to the end of the Wake Forest game. So
cool. Well, we are headed down to Jacksonville for the Georgia-Florida game on Friday. We're heading down on Friday for the game on Saturday. So, yeah, looking forward to a fun weekend at the world's largest outdoor cocktail party. Although you're not supposed to refer to it like that anymore, but I do. Well, today we're in conversation with Atlanta lawyer David Lee Windecher, author of the autobiography, The American Dream, History in the Making. Let me introduce you to David. David Lee Windecher is a trailblazing criminal defense attorney, author, and activist in the social justice movement to end mass incarceration, reduce recidivism, and redress racial inequity in the criminal justice system. In his autobiography, The American Dream, History in the Making, David shares the harsh realities of growing up as an impoverished immigrant on the streets of Miami-Dade County. He was arrested 13 times and spent over 7 months incarcerated as a juvenile. He dropped out of high school and joined a gang for protection. His street name was Red. David endured the brutal climate of the lawlessness on the streets by both criminals and the police. All the while, he dreamed of becoming a lawyer and fighting for those who don't have the resources to pay for justice. David began his path to self-rehabilitation when he earned his GED in March of 1998 and took his first academic steps toward his childhood dream of becoming a lawyer. He graduated summa cum laude from American Intercontinental University in Fort Lauderdale, Florida in 2005 and earned his Juris Doctorate degree from John Marshall Law School in Atlanta in 2012. David was admitted to the Georgia Bar in 2012 and the Florida Bar in 2014. David is a member of the Georgia and Florida Court of Appeals, the Georgia and Florida Supreme Courts, the Northern District of Georgia United States District Court, and the American Bar Association. David specializes in criminal defense, juvenile law, and expungement procedures. In 2022, the National Football League awarded him with the Inspire Change Changemaker Award. David, welcome to the show.
welcome.
Hey, how's it going? Robin, Lester, so cool. So you got a Georgia fan and a Georgia Tech fan. How do you guys keep the podcast going without getting at each other?
Hey, as do as those in the law do, strive mightily, but eat and drink as friends. That's our motto in law and football. So
we're going to be best. We're best buddies, and we've only known each other for almost 40 years. But
right.
Best buddies all the way until it comes up to when Georgia plays Georgia Tech this year, and all bets are off on that game. That's for sure.
I think both teams to the championship.
Well, maybe.
Well, wouldn't that be great to have the
Yeah.
champion and the runner up? I mean, I'd rather be the champion, but still, wouldn't it be great to have both from the great state of
Yeah.
Georgia?
It'd be awesome. Well, David, I just finished your book. You and I met when you were speaking at Lawyers Club not too long ago, and got your book, tabbed it. Really a wonderful read. I really enjoyed it, David. So congratulations on that. But let's share a little bit. I teased it a little bit with our listeners, but let's share a little bit about your growing up, because I'm almost willing to bet there's not another Georgia lawyer that has a background like yours.
I agree. Robin, first of all, thank you for grabbing a copy of the book and supporting. The proceeds go to the work that we do in the community. So that's really helpful. So thank you for that. And this year I republished the book because we now have 10 years of public service and anti-recidivism measures through restorative justice and pretrial diversion programming. So I wanted to include an epilogue in the book that shares with the audiences that what we have been doing in the community is actually working as it relates to the reforming of the system, and how the traditional measures of prosecution have been changed to some extent for nonviolent folks. So I wanted to share that. But yeah, starting back at the beginning, I was born in Los Angeles, and I was born in the gang capital of the world. I got to observe and witness a lot of things related to poverty and how those communities function. I was too young to truly appreciate what my parents were doing to try to keep us afloat, if you will. But I did understand what it meant to my father when he lost a lawsuit when I was a kid. And that's one of the first experiences I had with the American jurisprudence system. And I thought, my father didn't deserve to lose, because he didn't deserve to lose. He just couldn't afford an attorney. He didn't speak English and wasn't able to defend himself. And that was my memory. And it planted the seeds that I needed to eventually be inspired to pursue law. From that moment on, I remember thinking, one day I'm going to try to be a lawyer so I can help people like my dad who deserve representation. And that's where it all started. Then we moved to Argentina because we couldn't afford to stay where we were staying anymore. And I learned what real poverty is. We lived on a dirt road, on a cinder block house with a plastic sheet. While we didn't have a lot, we had our family. We had a good, loving home where my parents made it feel very special. And I have a younger brother and two sisters. We always had dinner together. We spent holidays together. We played together all the time. And we stayed there in Argentina for about 4 years until my dad had saved up enough money to pursue his American dream, which was to give his kids a chance to grow up in America. And we went back to the United States, but this time, instead of going west, we went east, and we ended up in South Florida, in Miami.
Absolutely fascinating, all of those different seasons of your life growing up. You mentioned your dad, and you give a lot of credit to your parents throughout the book, but also in the epilogue that you mentioned. And then there were several people that, when I was reading it, I jotted down their names of major influences in your life and your decision to get out of the gang and turn your life around. One of whom was a young woman who seemed, Nicole's her name, and she seemed to be the person to say, you can do this. She was studying, you wanted to study. And so a person your own age really motivated you and helped you turn things around to begin with, right?
Certainly. And Nicole was a godsend. She came at the back end of my experience with the criminal justice system. I got to Florida when I was 10. I got arrested at 11. By the time I was 19, I ended up with 13 arrests in and out of the system. And right around the time that I wanted to find a way out to escape the criminal justice system, I met her, and we had a conversation, and we ended up going out for dinner. And after dinner, we hung out, and she wanted to talk about stuff. And she says to me, what do you want to do when you get older? And I thought I wanted to be a lawyer. So I explained to her, I want to be a lawyer. But my concern was that I just have this back. I think it's going to be possible. And I asked her, so I turned the conversation around and I asked her, I said, well, what do you want to do when you get older? And she said, I want to be a police officer. And I thought, this is going to be a hard match because I'm on one side of the law and she's wanting to be a law enforcement agent. But she said to me, she's like, listen, if you could just stop hanging out with the gang and start focusing on certain things, I will tutor you to get your GED. I will help you get into college, and I will do anything I can in my power to help you get into law school. And she wasn't idle with her promise. She was focused on tutoring me. I started working with her, and in March of 1998, I ended up getting my GED, which was my first little belief, Robin, of that I could fit into the world, because I had scored 155 out of 160 questions right. And I thought, if I roll my sleeves up and if I try, I can actually do this. And so now my GED is actually framed on the wall right next to my law, just as important. It was the stepping stone to do it. And Nicole, she was wonderful. We were together for 3.5 years. But there was a point where she ended up getting an internship at the same police department that deployed a helicopter on me in one of my arrests. And so I knew if she and I stayed together, she would maybe get blackballed and not get a chance. And so we split up and agreed that we would always check on each other. And right when I published the book, I heard from her because I was on NPR talking about the book. And so she calls me because she was listening to NPR, and I knew she's got the personality for that. So she calls me up and like, I can't believe it. You published a book and you have my name in it. And I told her, I was like, I just thank God all the time that he put you in my life, because you really helped me understand that I could be a part of the world despite my broken circumstances. And the best part about Nicole's story is that she ended up retiring as one of the commissioners of the police department there in the same jurisdiction that arrested me 10 out of 13 times.
Wow.
So
I didn't know that part.
I've always thought 13's always been my lucky number. I was born on the 13th. But what was it about arrest number 13 that was different that, you're like, this isn't just working?
Great question, Lester. So, one thing, I'm completely covered in tattoos, but the one thing I'm not going to tattoo on myself is number 13, because I don't want to get deported. 13 can create certain situations. But what happened to me was that in April of 97, that was my last arrest, number 13. Leading up to that moment, I started having these visions while I was incarcerated. And I would fall asleep and I would have these dreams of me being in court, but not wearing an orange jumpsuit. I was wearing a suit and I'm talking, and it's like the Charlie Brown underwater voice. And I don't know what's going on, but I see myself in a courtroom and I'm standing next to someone that it feels like I'm representing them. And then something happens in court and I wake up, and it's happening to me a lot while I'm incarcerated. And so I thought that was God sending me a message like, look, there's something here for you, but you have to figure it out. And every time I got out, I could see the pain in my parents' face. So it was like a combination of the vision with the pain I was causing my family, that I just told myself, this is it. And I was also 19 at that point. So I started kind of coming together cognitively, emotionally. And I realized, like, I have some control over this. While I was in an environment that was a bit unpredictable as it relates to like what was going on in the streets and also what was going on with corrupt police, I knew that if I just hid in the shadows, I could find a way not to get arrested. And I remember walking out of jail and thinking to myself, do not look back. This is it. I am never going to see a jail again, at least as a defendant. And that's what I did. I just kept walking and walking until I couldn't see the jail anymore when I got released. And I found my way home, and that was it. I promised myself I'm not going to get arrested anymore. I want to become a lawyer.
So what was the sort of, and I think a lot of times we asked what caused X to happen. And it's kind of overdetermined. It's never just one thing. It's probably a combination of things. Like you got a great mentor that was there at the right time and whatnot. But when you were involved in all the criminal activity, was it the poverty? Was it acceptance amongst the gang? Was it need to feed yourself? What sort of drove your continued involvement in it?
Yeah, it was a combination of those things. So when I first was arrested at 11, I was put on probation. So my dynamic completely changed. Parents didn't want their kids hanging out with me, and so that changed who I could hang out with. And then I'm in an environment that is saturated by gangs, and it's either Latino community or Black community, and I'm Latino, but I look Caucasian. And so
you look kind of Irish to me.
You look Irish.
Definitely not Latino, right? No. I would get jumped a lot. And on top of not being able to have friends because I was the kid with a record, on top of getting jumped a lot, I couldn't even get a job, right? I couldn't get a job because when I was old enough, 14 years old, to go out to go get a job at a restaurant and be a busboy, or go work at Little Caesars and do the cashier, whatever, I couldn't do that because every time I applied for something, I would get rejected because of my background. So I had this retail theft from age 11 that would prevent me from getting a job. So even though I tried, I couldn't. There was nothing to do. And so I'm getting jumped. I don't have friends. I witnessed a murder also at age 14, I witnessed a murder. I can't get a job. I got to figure something out. And after I took a serious beating from a group of kids that were not fans of mine, I went to somebody and I said, listen, I know it looks like you guys have a group of people. How do I get involved? And they explained to me the initiation process, and I went through with it. And my whole life changed. Everything changed at that point because I had protection now. So I had resource now, and I had a platform, which, I didn't have. So I had hope to survive at that point. And there's not a lot of hope in these environments because if you go down there and if you've experienced South Florida, it's not South Beach, it's not Brickell, it's not Coral Gables, it's the inner cities. It's the majority of it. And it's a scary, scary environment. And so I wanted the protection and I wanted the money because I was struggling with poverty. And I knew that there was resource and protection there. And that's why I did it, Lester.
Super interesting. And I can remember your first incarceration when you were 11, did you say? You stole some clips that go on a bicycle so your friend could ride on your bicycle with you.
That's right. So we had, my dad bought us a used bicycle when we were kids, and it had a strip gooseneck, which means that the handlebars can't be tightened. And so if I wanted to tow my brother or a friend, the handlebars would just pivot forward. And right around the time of that arrest, there was a lot of pickup football games because it was like the NFL playoffs. And so I wanted to go with my brother to this park where we could all play football. And so I thought I need a set of pegs so I could tow my brother on the back wheels. He could stand up and hold on to my shoulders. And so I made the mistake of, getting arrested and trying to steal a set of pegs.
And then I think you wrote, I think your last incarceration was you were arrested for walking. Mm-hmm. Is that right?
Yes. It was tough. I think I lost myself a little bit in that moment because there was an accident on Ives Dairy Road, which is close to where my parents lived. And there was a memorial there, and it was for a girl named Nicole Penrod, who her dad owned Nikki Beach in South Beach, the restaurant. And there was a memorial there, and my friend Joey and I were walking by, and we observed it. We ended up realizing that there was a wallet there, like a female's little kind of wallet. And I don't remember the girl's name now, maybe Shannon something, but the ID, we knew what it was based on what we saw. And so we put it back and we just kept walking, and we crossed the path through a school called Miami-Dade Ives Elementary. So we crossed it's late now. It's like 7 o'clock at night, 8 o'clock at night. So we crossed through the school and just walked out to the other side where we came to the neighborhood. Well, a police officer pulls up and he's, pretty aggressive with us. And he's like, "Where's the gun?" And we're like, "What gun?" And we're like, "There's no gun." So we just kind of casually keep walking. And he's like, "Stop." And then he's like, "Where's the gun?" And at that point, I'm like, "There is no gun." And then he explains to us that somebody called and said that they saw us brandishing a firearm. And I was like, well, that's not true. And I said, there's no firearm, right? And so he draws his weapon on us and he gets us to stop. And then he starts trying, you can see him like kind of like processing and trying to think through it. And then he passes down, there's no gun. And at this point, I'm not very cooperative. I'm like, so where's the gun? What's up with the gun? Have you found a gun? There's no gun on me, right? All right, I'm out of here. And he's, you're under arrest for loitering and criminal trespass. And at that point, I lost my mind. I'm like, I can't win for losing here. Like, what am I supposed to do? I didn't mean to break a law crossing across a green patch of grass just to go all the way around. And he was not very friendly and slammed my head on the car. You know, I said some really disrespectful things to the officer, and but it didn't go anywhere. I sat for like 10 days in custody because obviously I have a history. And so I sat for a few days, but the state attorney assigned to the case obviously saw it was ridiculous and they dismissed it right away. So I all of a sudden got out. And that's why, Lester, you know, I'm done. I don't want to deal with the system anymore. I don't want to deal with corrupt police anymore. I don't want to be inside a box anymore. And I was just sick to my stomach during those 10 days in custody because I'm like, I can't, how do I win? What do I need? What do I do here? You know, and I just couldn't answer that question. So I'm like, I'm just going to stay quiet and hide in the shadows for a while. And that's kind of what I did.
So, you know, and you're very active in the reducing incarceration. And you know, to my way of thinking, a lot of people that want to talk about whether people ought to go to the penitentiary or not go to the penitentiary, you know, they've got no experience with it, either as a lawyer or certainly, you know, with the experience that you had and the things that you saw, you know, through your life there, you know, in Miami. And so, you know, you always get accused if you're, you know, for prison reform of, oh, you're just trying to be soft on folks. You don't think anybody belongs in prison, that kind of thing. So where do you kind of come down on all this? Because you obviously saw some pretty horrible things and probably saw people that were in gangs that belonged in prison and probably maybe saw some law enforcement officers that belonged in prison.
Oh, yeah. You know, there's so much to say to that, but that's I think that perspective that you just shared about what I got to observe in my life is the driving factor of why I can't stop doing what I'm doing. No 16-year-old should be incarcerated with grown men. Observing someone getting raped is, you know, I don't know how much money I spend on therapy. Watching people get stabbed or shanked, not good for a young person. The corruption, right? I remember getting pulled over and not having anything on me and getting arrested for stuff, or getting pulled over and having drugs and money in the car. And they're like, it's your lucky day and we're going to let you go today. We're just going to take your stuff. Or paying off the cops to protect the environment that was considered our territory so we could, you know, transact. It was hard to, as a young person, wrap my head around all those things. But I realized looking back that God had a plan for my life, and it was to go through poverty, and it was to go through the criminal justice system, and it was to see all of the perverse and corrupt things that are happening behind the scenes. And it was also to help me, 13 arrests. By arrest number 7 or 8, the public defenders keep telling me they want to give me a plea offer. And I started telling them, forget about it. You're fired. I'll just handle my own case. And that's why while I'm incarcerated, I could practice law. I just don't have a law license. And so all of these things, Lester, gave me the perspective I needed to understand, to not be judgmental on people, to understand that people are born into circumstances they didn't choose, or are struggling with circumstances that they prefer not to be struggling with: poverty, substance use disorder, mental health. And so my focus has always been on nonviolent folks, to try to advocate for them, that they are dealing with circumstances that can be targeted with proper treatment so that they can be rehabilitated and reintegrated permanently into the system. And the last thing I'll say about the whole system thing and all that, you know, we're in Georgia where sometimes you get some unreasonable offers and recommendations for resolution on cases that include custodial sentences. And I think that, frankly, if you want to be a prosecutor, you should go sit in custody for 90 days and get paid for it. Go ahead and get paid for it, but sit in there for 90 days and let me know if you're making those recommendations, because they don't have that perspective to understand it changes you in ways that some people cannot come back from. I was very fortunate that I had a loving family. God put great people in my life, and I was able to rehabilitate my criminogenic behaviors. And I was always also be able to address the trauma that I had because I developed the ability to create resources for myself. But yeah, I think that experience is what shaped the inspiration and the movement behind the work that we do in anti-recidivism, because there are a lot of people that are good people that are incarcerated, and they're incarcerated because the belief is incorrect. The belief is that they're broken and they cannot be rehabilitated and reintegrated. And that's not true at all. I mean, I wish there were more of me. I wish I was not the exception. I wish I was the rule. I wish that we looked at people, and instead of doing the traditional thing about being punitive with someone, that we would be thoughtful and considerate and more loving towards them, because no one wants to be a criminal. And I can say that from my own experience. It didn't feel good breaking the law. It didn't feel good having to sell drugs. It didn't feel good creating harm to my family, my community. I didn't know how else to survive.
David, when you decided, I'm getting out of this gang, I'm going to turn my life over, turn it around. You've mentioned a couple of times that you feel like God had a plan for you, and it is evident that God is very important in your life. And I love the story about how you one day drove to a church or a cathedral, Annunciation, went in there by yourself, prayed, and yet a woman gave you a poem. And I assume it was a sister in the church. I'm not sure. I assume it was a sister. But she talked to you and gave you a poem that became very important in your life called The Monument.
Yes, by Blaine Jorgensen.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about that.
So
incident.
October 16th, 2001, and that's on my birthday. And the reason why the time is important is because in 2001, Nicole and I had just split up because of her internship with the police department. And I had just started college courses in August. So I'm really struggling. I have a broken heart. I don't fit into the college environment. I have left the criminal street gang. I don't have my resources, my protection. I feel like I'm all alone out here, and that's when you have to trust the most, right? Like, you have to trust him to put you through adversity that helps form you. And I didn't. At that point, I was not atheist, but I was very agnostic. I thought that God had a really awful sense of humor, putting me in that situation. So I felt like I needed to have a conversation with him, because I couldn't keep going on my own. I felt like I was by myself on my own, and I needed help. I needed to believe that there was a plan for my life, a purpose for my life, and I knew where I wanted to go, but I didn't know if I could get there. So I went to church. And I just, I remember opening up a hymn book, and there's a lot of fees and thaws in there. So I'm like, this is not going to work. So I just dropped down to my knees, and I just started just speaking from the heart. And I apologized first. And I told them I was sorry for all of the ugly things that I did. And I asked them for help, because I felt like my little brothers and sisters were becoming who I was, and I didn't want that. And I was tired of watching my parents struggle and have pain because of my poor decisions. And so I remember just rambling just over and over, being apologetic, and just, I didn't even realize, but I had like tears running down my eyes. And when I opened up my eyes, I see this woman, like a shadow standing there, and she was so kind, because she was waiting, she was waiting for me to like finish whatever I was doing. And she's like, come with me. And she showed me the statue of Mother Mary. And she gave me two things. She gave me the poem, and she gave me the Lord's Prayer. And we just talked for like an hour. And, I told her what was going on. And she's like, look, anytime that you feel like this, pray the Lord's Prayer, and you'll feel much, much better. And just keep doing that until you get to where you're trying to go. And I remember that's kind of like what started my faith-based journey. You know, I was still skeptical a little bit. It took years to develop my faith, but that was the beginning. But I committed my life to him at that point. I was like, I'm yours, you know.
The poem, the Monument, which I had not read before, but to me, it really does kind of sum up your journey. And it really does. It's like it was written about you. And the last paragraphs, and this is God talking to the reader, says, the monument that you make of your life with the help of your problems will be the symbol of your love for me. And like that's David all wrapped up into a paragraph.
I read that poem every day for like 10 years. I kid you not. Every day.
Awesome.
I would stop by where that poem was on my refrigerator and I would read it. I would read word for word before I left the house, before I did anything. And I thought, it doesn't matter what I'm facing. I believe that the adversity that he gives me is going to result in something really meaningful and positive. And I just stuck with it. And then, you know, I tattooed it on the back of my leg. And so I have it there permanently. I really think that you're right. Like it felt like he was talking to me through that poem. And then for her to know to give me that, which was like, you know, you think about that and she didn't know me from anyone, right? But somehow she knew to give me that. And
that's just such a special story to me. We would call that a God wink. She also gave you a rosary that comes back later after you have a car wreck. And you and you were not going to be without that rosary, which I thought was interesting.
Oh yeah, nothing was going to stop me from getting that rosary. I remember I wasn't at a point in my life where like I would wear the rosary. I'm not a jewelry guy anyway. That's not my thing. But I just wasn't. I don't know. And I just thought, I'm going to put it around my rearview mirror. And I'm coming home from school one day, and someone. I remember it was a tourist was driving a Ford Aerostar and ran a red light. And once I knew they ran the red light, and I saw them coming, everything slowed down. It's like in the movies. It was just super slow. And I remember the car impacting my car and just watching the metal come closer and closer and closer. And then like a huge light, you know.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry to bring it up and walk you through it again.
It's okay. Yeah, so it was like a huge light, and I didn't nothing else until I came to. And then when I came to, I remember I could feel water, and because it was raining, but it was cut, and it was all blood, but I was alive, and you know I was intact. And somebody was asking me if I was okay. And all I kept thinking about was the rosary, because I remember like thinking, this is it. This is the end, you know, like I'm dead. And it felt like this was just a few days after I got the rosary. This is not like months later. Just got it. I don't know. Maybe I went, you know, because I remember it was probably over the weekend and then went back to school on Monday. So it was just like that fast. But yeah, I told my dad, I was like, I need you to take me to the tow yard. I'm going to climb the fence. I'm going to get in my car. I'm going to find that rosary. And I found that rosary. You know, I wasn't going to give up that rosary no matter what, because it just felt like that was his sign to me.
So
yes.
With all the folks that you've worked with, to try to get them to sort of follow your path out, maybe not to the law, but at least out of where they are, do you feel like that's been mostly successful, or, you know, is it that, well, it may be 1 in 10, but the one's worth it? How do you feel about that and about getting others on the same path that you've followed?
So when I first started on this journey, Lester, I used to think if I can reach one person, then that's good. That matters, you know. So if I can only reach one person, that would matter. I don't think about it like that anymore. I think about it in volumes now, because after 15 years of experience of practice in law, I started to realize that there is a lot of opportunity for positive change in our criminal justice system. And to say that we can impact one person is no longer okay. I think that there's groupings of people that we can really truly help. There's more folks going through what I went through than not, right? And those are the people that are in the system. A background is preventing them from a job. A background is preventing them from safe and adequate housing. A lack of access to education is preventing them from getting onto higher ground. I'm a taxpayer, not a tax burden. So I see it as we need to find a way to create the awareness through advocacy that the traditional methods of prosecution are creating more problems for our community than we actually realize. If we invested in people, provided them with educational resources and workforce training and placement, those people will not recidivate. And so I don't want to ever come with the mindset that we reach one person. At this point, I want to reach one entire courthouse. And if this one entire courthouse can reform its processes to consider alternative prosecutorial methods for nonviolent folks, now we're making a difference. Because one entire courthouse changing the culture of how they handle cases would advance public safety, would advance community experiences, would also create more fiscally responsible uses of taxpayer monies, because the reality is that, you know, arresting, prosecuting, incarcerating, and supervising someone is incredibly expensive. Whereas these restorative justice methods are much more cost effective, except that we don't have all that buy-in yet. That buy-in is coming slowly but surely. The momentum is building. But yeah, so to answer your question, I want to reach as many people as we can, because I don't think anybody is beyond hope or redemption. And it's just a matter of how do we get to that person? And the way that we get to that person is if more prosecuting officials allow us to be in their courtrooms to provide this type of programming.
And is that how you came up with the idea of RED?
Yes, I think
which I'll tell our listeners, RED stands for Rehabilitation Enables Dreams.
That's right. So to answer your question, Robin, it wasn't one thing. It was like the culmination of my life. The effects, the moments, right? Being in the system and sitting there and observing how that, I'm like, this doesn't make any sense, right? I don't know how to make sense of what I'm trying to say at that point in my life, but this does not make sense. And so that was one thing. Then understanding criminal procedure, understanding the effects of criminal convictions, and not just the effect on the individual who has the conviction, the effect on their family, the effect on the community that they're attached to, the effect on the taxpayer, you know, and then advancing my practitioner abilities and understanding where Georgia stands in this data, highest rate of correctional control. Well, that's a problem, right? We know that all these convictions, in Georgia, we have like 11 million people and about 5 million of them have a criminal conviction. Do you think the other 6 million are impacted negatively by that or positively? Because I can answer that question without any concern that the answer is it is a negative impact on all those other 6 million individuals, that we have all these people with convictions that are preventing them from working. And so all of these things that happened is what inspired me. I was fighting so hard to get to the moment where I could swear into the Florida bar. But that was the moment where it all changed, because just a few weeks before I got my oath of attorney for the Florida bar, I had to go in for an investigative hearing before the Board of Bar Examiners, where they grilled me. I mean, they asked me every ugly question you can possibly think of. And that was one of the hardest things I had to go through, because these people had no issue just taking shots after shots after shots at me. But I think that they wanted to see if I had the composure or the emotional intelligence to handle people's affairs and finances in Florida. And so after I got that, I got my oath of attorney, and I knew I was going to go to the courthouse where I was facing 15 years in prison at one time to swear in. And that was the moment, because I thought that that moment was going to give me peace. And again, that Charlie Brown voice happened while the judge is reading the oath, and everything is flashing before me. And that moment is what gave me purpose. And that's how RED was born, because I told that Board of Bar Examiners a couple of weeks before, I said, listen, you guys, issue an oath of attorney, I will publish a book, and I will use every penny to create a program to make sure that other people like me have another chance to be in the same position that I'm in, or even better. And that moment is when it all happened. You know, my family's there. I'm getting sworn in. It's in the courthouse where all this happened. And that's how Red was born. It was born in my mind. But I came back to Georgia, a ball of fire, wanting to figure out the next moves. And, you know, we started there.
I feel like once our episode of this podcast is published, I want to send it to the Florida Board of Bar Examiners.
Why just Florida? Let's send it to Georgia as well as Bar Fitness. In Georgia. Well, by the way, I have to say that, and I've said this, but not aimed at any particular person, but if you judge by the number of disbarments, bar fitness committees are doing some of the lousiest job of any group, because there's routinely disbarments, and very rarely are those people that were screened out or stopped and questioned like you were, David.
Yeah, I had no idea that was the case with that space, but I can see it. You know, I mean, I always tell people I've seen ugly things in my life, but those ugly things have come after. The ugliest things have come after I've gotten a law license, behind that law license, right? Obviously, don't want to get too into the details there, but you can imagine some of the things that people ask me when I get into their courthouses, and they're like, oh, you're that TV lawyer. You're that guy with that story. You know, there's certain things that they'll ask, like, you know, I'm just throwing a hypothetical out there that they may ask me, if they can afford you, what else can they afford? And I'm like, wow, that is bold, you know, and that's just, it's all over the place. And that when I first started practicing law, Lester, I used to have this view that this is a prestigious environment, and, you know, and everybody's above board, and we're all working hard to be ethical practitioners, and we're going to advance the law for everybody's best interest. Oh man, I needed that wake up call so bad, because I really
ever feel like you just joined another gang here.
It's one of the worst gangs in the world. Scariest if you think about it. I mean, I don't want to keep. I'm not. You know,
no, I think it's fair, and I think one of the things too is that I've always viewed what I do as a trade, just like you know, being a carpenter or you know, a blacksmith or whatever. I mean, I have a trade, and my trade is advocacy. You know, and I like to think that one of the keys to good advocacy is not believing that you inhabit some rarefied, exalted place in society.
I love that humility. That is so good for you, because I look at it something like I'm in social services, right? I'm in customer service. The better customer service that I can provide, the better lawyer I'm going to be, because someone's going to sit there and they're going to be in the most precarious moment of their life, and they don't need to be judged. They need to be understood. They need to be seen. They need to be heard. And the better service that I can provide them, the more important that they're going to feel that I'm taking their case and their seriousness and, the seriousness behind it of how I'm going to help them get their life back on track. So I truly appreciate how you see your ability to help someone.
Going back to your experience, to remind our listeners, you passed the Georgia bar and were admitted to the Georgia bar as a lawyer, and then you wanted to go back and I think one of the chapters in your book is poetic justice, when you went back and got admitted to the Florida bar. But it seemed like the Florida bar was much harder to get admitted to than the Georgia bar, even though you had worked for the DeKalb County District Attorney's Office. And the DA then, Robert James, recommended you and supported you. And yet the Florida bar didn't seem to think that was any big deal. That was very hard for me to understand, how the Florida bar treated you after you're already a practicing lawyer in the state of Georgia.
Oh, that was awful, Robin. And, you know, so I went from the DA's office to go into private practice with Manny Aurora. And, you know, I remember thinking it was such a blessing that I had the ability to practice, because I didn't have to worry about figuring out how I would, you know, take care of myself. But from 2012, when I graduated in Georgia and got licensed here, it took almost 2 years. It took a little bit, 2 years. 2014 when I got sworn in, and it was just a rigorous process because at some point they started asking me for things like, this was mail exchange, right? So they send me a letter, we need this, I respond, then they say, all right, we need this. At one point, they sent me a letter asking for all of the notices to appear on every traffic ticket and arrest that I had. And I'm like, who keeps a portfolio of all of their bad decisions? I don't know. I don't have that. And then it's not even archived, so I can't get it if I want to. So I felt like they were trying to push me away. And but to me, that's Florida, right? Like I had that experience with the 13 arrests there. Some of the stuff that I've seen there is awful. And it was just incredible to experience that. But I remember thinking, nothing's going to stop me. Nothing's going to stop me. And that was the moment where Manny represented me.
Oh,
and
yeah.
And so when Manny represented me there, he asked them, he was like, my question is like, if he can't have a license practice law, then who can? Like if you can't give him one, just take mine at this point. I'm confused by this whole process because he thought it was just, he thought I earned it at that point. But Florida does what Florida does. And so they put me through all that stuff. And I'm glad, except at one point, there was one final step. And the final step, if they wouldn't approve me at an investigative hearing, was to go present before the Supreme Court and make my argument there. And I was kind of at that point, Robin, not that I enjoy pain, but I was just like, you know what? Deny me, because I would love the Supreme Court and let that be the case. But that never happened.
You didn't get to that. You didn't have to do that final step. They finally admitted you, which was great. But your practice is now largely in Georgia. Do you practice some in Florida, or is it all Georgia?
I do some in Florida. I keep my Florida license intact, one, primarily because of my story. I want people there to know that this is home, right, to some extent. And so if they find out, I'm always licensed. But then I also still get phone calls. This phone number is the same number from when I was selling drugs. And so some people call me sometimes that you wouldn't expect. And they're like, hey, I heard you're a lawyer now, and I got this case, and I'm down here in Dade County, and I need you to help me out. And so that happens from time to time. And I enjoy going back there and working. But frankly speaking, I still have some, I don't know, and I don't get the best feelings being down there. Yeah,
I don't blame you on that. But let's talk a little bit more about RED, R-E-D, Rehabilitation Enables Dreams. And it's a program you've started. And what I understand is it has two programs, a 12-month restorative justice program and a 6-month pretrial diversion program. David, I assume you are the mastermind, that you created this based on your personal experience and what should happen instead of what has been happening.
That's right. And I don't want to say I'm the mastermind, because there are so many great people that have been behind us over the last 10 years to help us create the program and the curriculum that we created. And just to clarify, there are 2 programs and 2 organizations. There's RED, which is Restorative Justice, and there's RED Ed, which does pretrial diversion. So what ended up happening was this. When I finished law school, there was the criminal justice, the Special Counsel on Criminal Justice Reform here in Georgia. And it was an interbranch bipartisan group of people tasked with researching how to address the recidivism issue, the correctional control issue, the felony probation issues that we were having here in Georgia. And those reports that this group was putting out every year kind of gave me a roadmap to follow of how to address this issue. And so we wanted to focus on nonviolent folks, which has always been our focus. And we wanted to provide them with resources, GED, mentoring, workforce training and placement, all of that kind of stuff. And we did that for several years till we had an actual curriculum. And now that we developed the actual curriculum, we have social, civic, financial, and digital literacy training that we do for everybody that goes through our program. So they all go through the same the 12-month restorative justice program goes through this strong intervention, multiple touch points a month that focuses on developing those type of literacies. And once they finish the program, they get their cases dismissed. their records restricted, and their files sealed. So when they're reintegrated into the community, they don't have a background that's going to prevent them from accessing good jobs or housing that they need and things of that sort. And then Red Ed is a focus on strictly providing digital programming. So it's a pretrial diversion type of program where for the first time, nonviolent offender, we don't need to put them in court for 2 years. We don't need to put them on probation. We don't need to put them in incarceration. So we provide them with the life skills training that they need in order to not come back to the criminal justice system. So the 6-month program is a downward departure of the 12-month program. The IP that we use, the intellectual property that we use, was created by the nonprofit and issued a license to Red Ed so that it could help fund the nonprofit.
So let me ask you a very practical question. And, I do just about anything that involves going into a courtroom, but I still do a lot of criminal defense. So, I've got a client and, they don't, I've got a client and the client doesn't have a defense and, they need, they're facing prison or whatever. Can these programs help? And if so, how? And can they happen statewide, or are there only certain places that you've been able to get this into? How is this a resource for lawyers like me who have clients?
So that's a great question. And I love it because before we were doing the 6-month program, I was testing the curriculum on my private clients. So my clients who had those type of cases where they needed to bolster their character, if you will, I would have them do the program. So they would complete the modules, they would get the certificates, and then I would go to court and I would show the prosecutors, look, before even arraignment, these folks have done emotional intelligence training. They've done 2 different modules of that. They've done financial literacy training. They've done substance use disorder training. They've done civic education to understand the compromises to their constitutional rights with a conviction. And they did a know your rights module so they understand how to remain law abiding. And so I show up with these certificates and it helps me with the negotiations process for a better recommendation because it shows, hey, this person had the initiative, A, to do this, and B, they went through this process to actually advance themselves some way with regards to their character. What's interesting about this, Lester, is that over the last year, Cognia has come into the fold. Cognia is the largest accrediting body in the world, and we went through their whole accreditation process. And while it's not official yet, we soon will know if it is official. And I feel like based on what they've told us, we're going to be accredited. So this is now a program, a curriculum that is actually an organization that is accredited. We're the only one in the country. So we're not just doing it in Georgia. And I was testing that for years through all the counties in Georgia, wherever I have a case. But now we're starting to have conversations with cities and other states. One of the blessings from the NFL Social Justice Award is that it literally opened the door to all of those other cities where there are NFL teams that have social justice issues or concerns or opportunities. And so we're starting that conversation. This new digital, fully digital version of our program that we launched, we just did a soft launch and we're doing a hard launch in January. So we've been testing it all year. In Georgia, we're already in 3 different counties, Upson, Pike, and Spalding. And we're starting to have conversations with other counties to install our program there. So it looks like, hopefully by the end of next year, we'll be in like 20 counties. And then I don't know how many other cities and other states we'll be in, but I'm trying really hard to make that move.
And I'm going to assume Miami-Dade County is going to be one of those that you'd like to see it in.
Yes.
The ultimate poetic justice.
Oh, yeah. But I haven't even started that conversation with them because I know nothing is easy, in this space. But I feel like that if anything is going to be easy, it'll be there. Especially I've had the House of Representatives send me notices saying, please come home. I've had letters from elected officials there saying, please come home. And they want to go there. But I'm not ready and I also work for the Dolphins. You read the book. So I worked for the Dolphins. So I have some history with them. So it's just a matter of time, not if.
Yeah, when you held up your phone.
Very courageous to mention the Dolphins after what they did to the Falcons here last Sunday.
I couldn't believe that.
When you held up your phone, David, I thought you were going to say, this is the same number I sold all the tickets to the Dolphins game with.
I see God works in like the most interesting ways. But yeah, that number, if you call that number, you'll see it still goes to premier seats now. And that's what helped me get into law school.
Yeah, that's a great story, which got you connected with the NFL, which is kind of interesting too, because that I never would have predicted that, but it really helped you quite a bit. And now you have funding from the Arthur Blank Family Foundation, and you are still connected with NFL. So that extremely helpful to have that tie.
Yeah, Arthur Blank they're just wonderful people. You see all the work that they're in the community and throughout the whole state of Georgia. I mean, they do incredible work, and I'm very fortunate with them in that sense. I'm working with them to try to get into other cities with regards to our program, but they're just one of the great set of organizations that we are fortunate to be involved with. But the NFL, one thing I'll leave you with this, and the Dolphins, the number I sold, and I had the Twitter handle, they @FinSticks, but while I was in law school, they sued me in federal court to take back their handle. And I ended up just giving it up because I already had, right around that time, I had enough stuff going on to go deal with a federal lawsuit about the intellectual property.
No. Yeah, you didn't need to deal with that. And you'd already been paid for your phone number, so.
That's all I wanted. I just wanted to get through that and find a way to get into law school. So I was happy. I didn't need to go fight unnecessary fight.
So David, what? I'm sorry. Go ahead, Lester. I'm sorry.
Well, what I was going to say is, it strikes me, and I've never been a felony prosecutor before. I've done criminal defense and personal injury and a lot of other things. But it strikes me that one of the problems, I think, if you're a prosecutor, is like every assistant DA I deal with, it's like they're drowning. There's just case after case after. They barely have time to pick up the file and take a look at it and maybe see what the victim said if it is a victim-based crime. And and to some extent too with public defenders, and you're just trying to stem the tide. How did you find the time to do this, with your practice, to develop all this? And then what's the reception been like? Because it seems to me like it's just a great resource that you have here, that prosecutors just, it's not that you don't care. It's just that you don't have time to do anything other than try to clear the 10 cases that are going to go to trial next week if you don't.
Yeah, that's spot on. And the reason it is because the volume of cases is so high that the attention to detail on a per case basis is impossible to apply if you're a prosecutor. They're literally doing the best that they can. And I'm not, look, I get it. Sometimes bad things happen and they shouldn't happen. But the reality is that most of them are trying the best that they can to do the best job possible. But when you have a docket with hundreds of cases on it, and that's on loop, it's really hard to be effective. And one of the things that I try to explain to prosecutors is the reason our program is so good is because at arraignment, whoever's qualified based on our history, you could just roll them into the program. If it tracks everything, we give you back-end access. You can see the progression of each individual. You get reports on the entire cohort that you just matriculated. And guess what? It's going to reduce your administrative burden. You don't have to do anything. It's all fully digital. It's all tracked and provides you the reports that you want. And so it'll reduce the number of cases that they have, and it'll reduce the administrative burden associated with that process. So I wish that more of them would consider that, and especially now. That brings us to an interesting aspect of our program. Both of our programs have a risk assessment and emotional assessment tool embedded into it. So it's called an R&R, risk needs responsivity model, which is rooted in decades of anti-recidivism research. And so what we did was we created a level of service intake that allows us to determine the individual's needs. So, for example, if someone is struggling with poverty or homelessness or substance use disorder or mental health, we are going to know. And we're going to know based on how these questions are answered. And it's not like I'm asking, hey, do you have a mental health issue? We don't ask that. We had a child and adult psychiatrist help us create the way these question stems so that we could elicit answers to them without triggering trauma or making them defensive or just flat out lying. You're not going to ask a kid, are you in a gang? He's going to say no, right? It's a certain set of battery of questions that you ask that helps you say, okay, there's a flag here. We need to do it. Now, the reason this tool is so important, Lester, is because if you're a prosecutor and you use this tool, it'll help you understand if someone's going to complete probation successfully. Are they going to recidivate after they complete their sentence? Or do they have a need that we can address now so we can prevent that person from repeating an offense? And I wish that one of my focuses is that I want that tool that we created, that Kanya, the accrediting body, saw. I want to use that tool as a front-facing resource in the criminal justice system. And I've been talking to a lot of prosecutors about this. Use our risk assessment tool, use our emotional assessment tool to determine if you want to divert someone, to determine if you want to be lenient with someone, to determine what resources you want to allocate to that person. And if you can do that, you're actually providing a really good service because now that person has what they need so that they don't stay in the system.
Well, that's also, I mean, and I said, I've never been a felony prosecutor. I used to do misdemeanor, like city solicitor or traffic tickets. So you gotta, if you, even at that level, if you've got like somebody that's under 21, 20 miles an hour over the speed limit, you want to really give them a break, but you're afraid they're going to go kill somebody, maybe themselves. You don't want to, you don't want WSB showing up and saying, well, if he hadn't reduced this ticket, this kid wouldn't have had a license. And so it gives the prosecutor some sort of confidence that they're giving a break to somebody who's really going to take advantage of it as opposed to abuse it, it sounds like.
Yeah, rather than an educated guess, they are now they're making informed decisions because they have the accurate profile on someone and say, hey, okay, this person is susceptible to continued speeding. And the last thing we want is giving them a break. And then next thing they know, they're in here on a vehicular homicide. But yeah, I do agree. I think that the more information we have, the better decisions we can make as it relates to the dispositions that we really want. And so that's why data drives results, in my opinion. The more data that we have on each individual, the better. And what's interesting, Lester, is that each jurisdiction has its own issue. And so our program is not a one-size-fits-all approach. It's on a case-by-case basis, on a courthouse-by-courthouse basis, on a jurisdiction-by-jurisdiction basis, because we can understand the issues relevant to that specific geographic area.
It's wonderful, David. I always like to ask someone like you who has created this very successful program and very promising, what is the call to action? What can our listeners do to help?
Your listeners, the audience, can help us by engaging with us and letting us know if they have any contacts that they would like to share with us that may be considered decision makers in the criminal justice system that would consider installing our program. So any contacts with a prosecutor, a district attorney, a solicitor general, someone that is a decision maker in a specific jurisdiction that may have an interest and a need for this type of programming, that's what the audience can do. Connect us with that person, connect us with those individuals, and let us have a conversation with them. Since we did Lawyers Club, Robin, we've talked to so many people. So many people. We are actively talking to Cobb County, Fulton County, Douglas County. How
about DeKalb? That's my county.
Yeah. Who was at the event? I don't want to say any names, but
it's okay. Yeah.
Come see us in Bartow.
So yeah. In there too. So we're moving the needle. And one thing that I don't like to do is I don't want to bite off more than we can chew. And so I think God has a plan, and I'm going to follow his vision for it, right? Whatever his will is, that's what I'm going to focus on. And I think he opened certain doors the last 30, 45 days, and we're now trying to finalize, materialize those things. And then we'll transition to the next step, whatever that is. But we're excited. We want to do Metro Atlanta. We want to do rural Georgia. We want to go everywhere we can to help.
I wish you the best, and it just sounds fantastic, David. I'm so proud to know you and know of your story, and just uh, uh, I'm going to call you. I'm going to hope you call me your friend. I'll call you my friend. I just I loved your story, and just hope for nothing but success for you.
That is really kind and thoughtful of you. And I always tell people, when we engage and we meet each other, please always consider me a friend and a resource. So I really appreciate that outlook. I think that's how it is, right? We look out for each other here. When you hear someone's got something, or you can connect people, that's what we should do. That's what community is about. So thank you. And I know I need to answer the question of
Yeah, that's our last question to you: is how do you define justice?
no, and I've been thinking about that. And so the way I want to answer that is this, that I think that justice requires that the people involved in decisions that impact the lives of those charged with a crime and the community attached to them and the taxpayers funding that process, that those individuals strike a proper balance between punitive measures and rehabilitative approaches, because not everybody's going to fall in one category or the other. And so I think that it is intelligent for us to highly regard that process and strike a good balance. Some people need to be locked up because that's the best deterrent. Or some people need to be rehabilitated because we want them reintegrated. And that should be an approach that we keep an open mind about. And so I think that that's how we define justice, right? We just strike a balance between the two, because sometimes we need to be punitive, but sometimes we need to be rehabilitative. And let's not disregard one for the other. Let's always focus on doing what's right.
I think that's fantastic, David. Thank you for that. Again, we've been talking with Atlanta lawyer David Lee Windecher, author of the autobiography The American Dream, HiSstory in the Making, and founder of RED, Rehabilitation Enables Dreams. You can learn more about RED and make a donation at stoprecidivism.org. And you can purchase David's autobiography on Amazon or wherever you get your books. Thank you again, David.
Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate you both.
All right, folks, this is our spot in the program where Lester and I have seen a news item in the news that makes us go, and we'd like to share it with you. Lester, you're up.
All right. Mine comes from yesterday's New York Times. It is October 28th. It is a story about, it's entitled Judge Admonishes Border Patrol Leader for Tactics in Chicago. And as you know, there have been various Border Patrol operations in different cities. And so there was a lawsuit filed about that in Chicago. And the head of the Border Patrol operation there, he's a guy, I've looked, he's got an Instagram page. He's, very outspoken about the Border Patrol's role, named Gregory Bovino, who, as the New York Times says, has become the public face of President Trump's crackdown, was ordered to give the federal judge a daily report on the actions of his team from now on. Right. And so in the courtroom, the federal judge, Sarah Ellis, in the Northern District of Illinois, spent about an hour reading her ruling. And this all came about after there was tear gas used, where they were about to have a Halloween parade, different things like this. And the judge then ordered Mr. Bovino, who took the stand in his usual green fatigues and Border Patrol insignia, to appear in her federal courthouse at the end of every weekday to personally provide her with a report on the day's arrests and incidences. She says, I'll see you tomorrow at 6. And but one of the things I want to say is, regardless of how you feel about the immigration crackdown or whatever, and I'm certainly not commenting on anything else that the Border Patrol or Mr. Bovino must have done. But at the end of this, or in this hearing, Judge Ellis asked Mr. Bovino few detailed questions and did nearly all the talking throughout the hearing, reminding Mr. Bovino of the particulars of the temporary restraining order she issued early this month. limiting the use of tear gas. Mr. Bovino answered some questions with a simple yes, ma'am. Asked whether he was on the same page with the judge, he said, I understand what you're saying, Your Honor. We're on the same page. We will abide by the TRO. Now, as with anybody that goes to court, and Robin, you and I have been to court with a lot of people, they may abide by it or they may not abide by it. But I thought this was a really sort of good example, and I compliment Bovino for his conduct in court. Because this is sort of what the rule of law is all about. It's not people in green fatigues that are making the decisions. Those are subject to review. And, the appellate courts may come in, may reverse this, may not. But I thought, yes, ma'am, we're on the same page. I've listened to this. I'm going to try to abide by this order. Shows that you respect the ruling, even if you have different views about, even if you think it's a wrong ruling. So that's mine.
I like that. I read that article. I didn't read the New York Times, but I read an article about that. And she told him he must appear, her version of See You in Court, at
Right.
6 p.m. Eastern time every day. And I think today would be the first day. We're taping this on Wednesday, October 29, and right now it's 4:13 p.m. So I wanted to see if he made it today. So I can't wait to check in at 6:05 and see if he shows up.
Well, at one point too, the question was, part of her order was that everybody wear, all the Border Patrol folks wear have a camera,
body cam,
have a body cam.
Yeah.
At one point, she said, and that means you need to have the body cam, as well. And he acknowledged that he did not use a body worn camera himself, but promised to do so by the end of the week. We can get a camera by Friday, he said. So, again, okay. What people do outside of court or whatever, but we've seen a lot of sort of disrespect for rulings and misleading judges as some of this stuff has been litigated. And so, let's give credit where credit's due. I liked his response to that. And as they say on the, we got the body cam, we have a review of calls in football, and on the Georgia Tech Bobby Dodd Stadium, when they're having an official review, they say the proof is in the pudding. And so we'll see if there's any pudding here at the end of the day. But that's mine.
Right. Well, this is the headline. It comes from the ABA Journal. Judge recuses himself after impulsive comment from the bench about shooting attorneys. And this is a judge down in Wakulla County, Florida, and he's apologized and recused himself from an estate battle. His name is Judge Lane Smith of Florida's Second Judicial Circuit, and he told a newspaper down there, the Tallahassee Democrat, that he made an impulsive comment from the bench that he agreed was unprofessional and out of character. And what he said was to the lawyers in this estate fight, according to the transcript, was, I would like to tell the deputy to pull his gun and shoot all three of you. As far as my level of frustration, I really don't want him to do that. But guys, for crying out loud, what is this? The Keystone Cops? Just not very funny. And after that remark, the court reporter said she motioned to indicate that she was in the potential line of fire and said she really didn't desire to be shot. So one of the lawyers moved to recuse because he is obviously apparent bias, and the judge did recuse himself. So he's not on that case anymore, but I'm not sure how I feel about a judge who wants to shoot any attorney going in front of that judge anymore. Is that what he thinks of me? And I can remember in Georgia, this has been a while, but we had a judge that actually pulled a gun in court.
I'm familiar with that.
Yeah, I thought maybe you were. And I believe he has been removed. He was removed from the bench, I believe.
Left the bench. Yeah.
Yeah, left the bench. So a little bit different, but that reminded me of the judge who pulled the gun out. Was this judge in Florida one step away from pulling a gun out? I don't know. It's just a little scary. I'm glad he recognized I was out of line. At least he did that.
I spoke to the Georgia Juvenile Court judges about a week ago over in Athens at their annual conference. And, as you know, I represent a few judges every now and then. And, one of the things that I called to their attention was that this was from on Twitter, but there was a judge that was about to allow, they was talking about closing arguments in a murder case. And he said, now I'm not going to put any real time limits on you all, but there are not a lot of souls that get saved after 20 minutes. Now, growing up in a Southern Baptist church, I took it as an immediate reference to the sermon's supposed to last 20 minutes so you can beat the Methodists and the Presbyterians, to dinner after. And he's just saying, no sermon more than 20 minutes. And there were some people on Twitter that were just really outraged by this because, this person's life is at stake and you're not going to let them say what they need to say to save the defendant's soul. And I didn't take it that way at all. But the point that I sort of made, with these judges is, talking about getting shot, that's way over here. But there are even other things that seem kind of just to sound funny. It might be an attempt at humor or whatever. And just, coming from the court or coming from a judge, it kind of falls flat a little bit. Sometimes.
It always falls flat.
And even when there's no wrongful intent, no harmful intent. And, but we do have human beings as judges, and we want human beings as judges. So they're going to make mistakes.
Yeah.
Time to time.
Yes, I agree. Well, that does it for us today. We want to thank our sponsor, the Georgia Civil Justice System, and we thank our producer, Philip Hoover, and we thank our listeners. You can learn more about our host, Lestertate, at aikentate.com, and about me, robinfrazerclark, at gatriallawyers.net. You may listen to all the episodes of the podcast at seeyouincourtpodcast.org and anywhere you get your podcasts. And to remind you, we're also on youtube.com. Just search See You in Court podcast on YouTube. And Lester, we now have over 147,802 views on YouTube.
Wow. Yeah. And you actually get to see us, when you're on YouTube. But no, this has been a great thing we've had going, and we love our listeners, and we do.
It's a lot of fun for me and Lester, and we just really enjoy bringing it to you. All right, my friend. Until next time.
We'll see you
in court.
You've been listening to the See You in Court podcast, brought to you by the Georgia Civil Justice Foundation. Remember, justice is a shared journey, and your engagement makes all the difference. For further insight and resources, visit our website at www.seeyouincourtpodcast.org. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at See You in Court Podcast for additional content. And don't forget to engage with our community on facebook.com/seeyouincourtpodcast. Special thanks to our producer, Philip Hoover. I'm Fred Smith, Executive Director of the Georgia Civil Justice Foundation. You may learn more about the foundation at www.fairplay.org. Until next time, we'll see you in court.